headliner. I'm a headliner.
Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome back in to the Fantasy Headliners. Your boy Kyle bringing you all that juicy wide receiver action for week 13. We're going to be deep diving, talking about who we're going to be starting, who we're going to be sitting. But before we do that, we got to talk about a running back real quick. Zeke Elliott. On last week's show, I told y'all we were going to give away a Zeke Elliott autographed football, and we're going to do that just now. Congratulations to my man Mario Alcantar. Becoming a part of Headliner Nation has really boosted my performance on my fantasy league. Glad that all I have to do is listen to these awesome insights, chat with other headliners for advice, and it makes my player swapping decisions a whole lot easier. Hey Mario, glad that you're having a great season, but more importantly, excited that you're going to be winning this autograph football. Make sure you email us, info@thefantasyheadliners.com. Use the email associated with your YouTube account. We'll get your information. Make sure that you're signed up with Pristine Auction, and then we'll get you that football right away. And don't forget, if you want to be eligible for future giveaways as well, pristineauction.com. Use code word headliners when you sign up. It's a free account, and you're going to get $10 off, or not $10 off, but you're going to get a $10 coupon for your first purchase there. Ladies and gentlemen, though, we have got to talk about wide receivers, and for the second straight week, we're kicking it off with the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo in New England on Thursday Night Football. New England allows the 6th fewest fantasy points to opposing tight ends, but they had a little bit of an issue last week with Minnesota. Justin Jefferson, obviously they're going to have issues with him. Everybody does. But they also had issues with Adam Thielen. They also had issues with TJ Hawkinson. The defense just didn't look as crisp last week as what it normally would. And the big issue right now with Buffalo is Josh Allen's elbow. It's not healthy. He's not healthy. So for this week, I mean, I can't start Gabe Davis again this week. You know I love Gabe Davis. He's given us some huge performances this year. But unfortunately, that elbow issue has it's caused some issues with trying to go down the field. However, Isaiah McKenzie is going to be a sit. And I really wanted to list him as a start, but he just doesn't have the overall production this year, and he doesn't have the matchup either to hit that 15 threshold. However, I feel like he's a safe start. For half PPR and PPR leagues, I think he's going to be right around 10 fantasy points. And if he scores a touchdown, even better. But the reason I like Isaiah McKenzie a little bit more this week is because those dump-off passes, those intermediate routes, those areas where Josh Allen's having a little bit of an easier time getting the ball to, that's why I'm going with Isaiah McKenzie this week. In fact, I'm going to take him as my prize picks prop to play. I'm going to go over 28.5 receiving yards for Isaiah McKenzie. Josh Allen just is not able to push the ball down the field the entirety of the game the way that he's used to. When he needs to make the throws, yes, he will, but he's not taking as many shots deep as he would used to because, again, that elbow is acting up. For the New England Patriots, well, first off, Jacoby Myers went into the concussion protocol last week, and the Bills have had issues in the passing game. We've seen where they've had issues stopping the pass this year, but I'm not trusting anyone on New England going up against Buffalo this week. If you need somebody to really be that guy for you, though, it would be Nelson Aguilar. If I had to pick anyone, it would be Nelson Aguilar. However, if Jacoby Myers is cleared prior to kickoff on Thursday night, then I would have interest in him. But as of this recording, not cleared. Keep that in mind. Jacoby Myers, if he's cleared, he becomes a start. If he's not, he's going to be a sit. Nelson Aguilar would still be a sit. Maybe a big play would be in the books for him. Fantasy points galore in the Pittsburgh and Atlanta matchup. I mean, Pittsburgh allows the most fantasy points to wide receivers. Atlanta allows the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers. I just wish we had better wide receivers to bet on in this game. I'm going to be full sending on Pittsburgh, though. I am going to go Deontay Johnson, even though he hasn't done anything in a while and he's been a sit for a while. Going up against Atlanta with such a good matchup and the targets he's still continuing to get, he'll be a start for me this week. And George Pickens, He will also be a start. He's actually the wide receiver 1 in this offense right now. He's been performing the best and most consistent out of anybody on the team outside Pat Freiermuth. Both of these guys will be in there. And we don't know about Najee Harris as of yet either this week. We'll keep an eye on him. Jalen Warren's beat up. Everybody, it seems like, is beat up. Could be extra targets in a very good matchup for the Atlanta Falcons. Now, not sure I'm going to be starting anyone from Atlanta. Drake London was the wide receiver 11 weeks 1 through 3. Great start to the season. Since then, he has only had 40-plus receiving yards once. And he's only had 2 touchdowns since week 3. That's tough. That's a lot of inconsistency and a lot of really bad performances for me to want to run Drake London out there. Now, Olamide Zaccheaus, he's the guy that will get probably the most volume. We'll see him anywhere from probably 6 to 8 targets. Drake London might only get like 4 to 6 targets, but he's got a little big play potential. He's got the red zone potential. He's got the touchdown potential. I would like to pick one of these guys against Pittsburgh, but unfortunately, based on the performances we've seen so far this season, I'm just going to look elsewhere this week. Denver and Baltimore, and I know people are frustrated with Courtland Sutton. He has not offered the type of floor that people drafted him, or excuse me, the type of ceiling that people drafted him for at the beginning of the year. But it's kind of a Denver thing because nobody's performing at their ceiling, right? It's been a tough year all around for Denver. Courtland Sutton will be a start for me again this week. No Jerry Jeudy, 26 targets, 17 receptions, 223 yards over the last 3 weeks. He's the wide receiver 24, and he's averaging just over 10 fantasy points a game, 10.5. So yes, the upside is not there. No, Courtland Sutton's not going to win you a week. Yes, the opportunity has been there, and he's been a very safe play. If you've been starting him as a wide receiver 2, you've legit been getting wide receiver 2 performance. Not a whole lot of upside. If you've been starting him as your wide receiver 3, he's actually been doing better than what you could expect from that position there. So Courtland Sutton, he's going to remain a start for me because he's doing just enough to be that guy. For the Duve and Demarcus Robinson, though, I just want to take a second to realize how far the Duve has fallen. At the beginning of the year, we saw some big plays, saw some touchdowns. He was a guy that a lot of people wanted to start. It's kind of fallen off since then. In fact, if you look at his production score as a 0 right now, 5 weeks into the season, that was a 4. That's how far he has fallen. It's been an awful season so far from where they was at. Denver allows the second fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. I'm out on the Baltimore offense this week. Green Bay and Chicago will get together in that heated rivalry once again this weekend. Lazard, Christian Watson, Sammy Watkins. Christian Watson is the only one. We don't even know who's going to start this week. We don't even know if it's going to be Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love. We got to keep that in consideration. Christian Watson will be a start for me as of right now. I was worried about the performance last week against Philadelphia. He did just fine. He ended up doing just fine. I didn't think there would be a ceiling last week. He found that ceiling, which was good. Hopefully he can find that going up against Chicago this week in what is actually a little bit better matchup for him. And then for the Chicago Bears, nobody. Pringle scored last week. Claypool probably has the highest upside, but somebody's going to get Jair Alexander this week. Again, will Justin Fields end up missing another week? And it's just there's no ceiling here. Now, if Justin Fields were to start, we'll talk about Chase Claypool a little bit more. But for me this week, I'm out on all of them. Jacksonville and Detroit means Marvin Jones revenge game. Okay, maybe not that much. Detroit has been much better since the beginning of the season. They're still allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers, though. So have they been better? Yes, but they're still giving up points. That's just not as many as they did to start the year. With Jacksonville, we also don't know about Travis Etienne yet. We're not sure if he's going to be back this week. We'll have to keep an eye on that and monitor that. Christian Kirk has the highest upside for me. I mean, this is a guy, yes, a little bit of a down week last week, but he continues to get a lot of targets, and he's producing at a very high clip. He's a wide receiver 1. We'll start him going up against a defense like this, even if it's not the same upside we would have seen 3-4 weeks into the season. Then Zay Jones will also be a start. I mean, he's coming off a huge game last week, and I say it every single week. If he gets the volume, he gets the points. Just give him target. He's going to give us more than enough points. And like I said, Marvin Jones revenge game, I could see maybe a touchdown here. just like last week, but probably not a whole lot more than that. So I will stay away from him. And then for the Detroit Lions, Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to be the only guy I'll start this week. I mean, he's the wide receiver 5 over the last 3 weeks. He's got a good matchup here. He's dominating defenses. The Lions are able to scheme him in some very, very good ways. I'm looking at a potential touchdown from DJ Chark, though, because maybe it's a revenge game for him as well, going up against his former team. DJ Chark back, the wide receiver 2. Reynolds is banged up. Raymond is banged up. No more TJ Hawkinson. Swift isn't making the same type of involvement in the passing game as what we saw earlier in the season. DJ Chark with a big touchdown this week would not surprise me whatsoever. Cleveland and Houston, and speaking of revenge games, Deshaun Watson is back this week, and I'm sure his first week back from suspension, going up against his former team on the road, he's going to want to perform well. But will we get that from him? Houston allows the 8th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. And again, a lot of the reason of that is because of how much people run the ball against them. So it's a little bit of a skewed stat at that point. I try to kind of stay away from giving him too much credit for that. Not bad. Not great. I'm starting Donovan Peoples-Jones and Cooper this week. I just have a feeling that they're going to be throwing it a lot. They're going to want to get Deshaun Watson really rolling again, really get him kind of in the groove, give him a lot of opportunities, and I think that happens this week. With Brandon Cooks, I will list him as a start. I mean, obviously, if Cleveland performs well and we see that much throwing from them, Houston's also going to have to toss it around. Kyle Allen isn't, the greatest asset in the world when it comes to high upside wide receivers. But at least the good news is he could give Brandon Cooks just enough targets to make his week. New York Jets, Minnesota Vikings, MVP candidate Mike White. Oh, wait, maybe not. Maybe not. All right, it was just 1 week. But Mike White looked good. I mean, Jets fans turning on Zach Wilson already. Mike White's the guy that they want and need in that offense right now. Minnesota does allow the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers. Had a bad week defensively against the New England Patriots last week. And now they're going to be getting New York, who has, after 2 weeks ago, a lot more confidence on their offensive side of the ball. We're going to go back to Garrett Wilson. And we sat him last week, and I didn't love it. But giving that Mike White was going to be starting and what we had seen from the offense, I just wasn't excited about it. I was worried that we could just see another down performance. He ended up balling out. I mean, if we see it once, hey, we saw it, it worked. Let's go there again, especially against a Minnesota team that has trouble stopping wide receivers. No Corey Davis, no Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore, yeah, maybe could end up being a guy that helps out a little bit now that we've got maybe a more reliable starter in there, but I'm not holding my breath for Elijah Moore. I mean, he's done a lot less and he has more this season. And then Justin Jefferson obviously will be a start, but New York allows the 3rd fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. So after Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, we're going to skip out on him this week, given such a given such a tough matchup. Washington and the New York Giants. New York still allows the 4th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. Still a little bit banged up. But I don't see Washington running away with this game, which was part of my concern about Dallas last week. And even Dallas didn't end up running away with it like I thought they would until later in the game. So I do think Terry McLaurin is in for a nice day. Is his ceiling there? Maybe not the same ceiling we've seen at times this week, but I do think he's got a good enough floor that will run him out there. Now, Curtis Samuel hasn't had more than 4 targets in a game since week 7, and he's only had 2 touchdowns since week 2 when he had touchdowns in back-to-back weeks. He's a sit for me. I'm done with Curtis Samuel. I mean, since Taylor Heineke has taken over on this team, it's a completely different team. He's looking at different guys. Curtis Samuel just isn't the same guy. Maybe he gets a rushing touchdown every once in a while, but he's not getting targets right now, and he's not really being utilized the way he was earlier in the season. And for the New York Giants, I mean, we're going to get Darius Slayton in the lineup this week. At least 6 targets in all but 2 games since week 6, and he has at least 60 receiving yards in the last 4. Again, maybe not a huge floor every single week, but a good enough floor, or excuse me, not a huge ceiling every week, but a good enough floor that wide receiver 3 status, he absolutely knocks that out of the park for you. Tennessee and Philadelphia, and Treylon Burks is getting a little bit closer to being a start, but not quite, and not in this matchup. Too much big play dependency for me right now, and this touchdown last week was basically a fluke, right? I'm not counting that as being any type of a great performance. recovered a touchdown in the end zone that Derrick Henry shouldn't have fumbled and normally doesn't. So we're going to sit him again this week. Tougher matchup. But Tennessee allows the second most fantasy points to wide receivers. Tennessee, the biggest reason that they have success in some games is when they get after the quarterback and they disrupt them. But you can't really get after Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts either gets away from you or he gets rid of the football. I'm not expecting that type of a performance from Tennessee. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith should both have good weeks this week. Seattle and the Rams are just beat up all over the place now, which includes Aaron Donald, who is also beat up on defense. So if we're going to give time for Geno Smith to hold the football and find his open receivers, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, you better bet your booty that they're going to be getting open. I'm going to have them both as a start this week. Seattle allows the 7th fewest fantasy points per game. We've got a backup quarterback. We're missing our top 2 wide receivers, and our tight end is barely healthy enough to be on the field. And oh, by the way, our running back doesn't even have an Achilles anymore. So because of all those things, no, we're not even touching the Rams offense this week. Miami and San Francisco is going to bring my Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week. Head on over to manscaped.com. Use code word headliners at checkout. You're going to get 20% off your entire order and free shipping. But with the Miami Dolphins, I mean, we don't sit Waddle or Hill. I still find it crazy that people just don't believe in Jalen Waddle, who is a top 12 wide receiver. He gets top 12 production and top 24 targets. It's crazy to me with how well this offense has been and how great Jalen Waddle has been, or excuse me, Tua Tagovailoa has been, that all of a sudden Jalen Waddle is the guy that we're worried about. No, we're not. You put him in your lineup every week. Deebo Samuel will end up being a start again for me this week, and he was going to end up being a sit. Quite honestly, if Christian McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell were both healthy this week, Deebo Samuel would have been a sit for me against Miami. But I do think that because we've got those guys banged up right now, we probably see Deebo Samuel with a few more touches out of the backfield than what he has been getting as of recent. He's still a high-risk start for me right now, but we're a little bit closer. Ayuk has the most upside for me, though. Love Brandon Ayuk. He's a guy that continues to produce. He is seeing decent targets. He's a little big play dependent, a little touchdown dependent at times, but I think given a matchup against Miami where they're going to be throwing it and probably running toe-to-toe with San Francisco, Ayuk's going to see some decent production. KC and Cincinnati, and this is not a great matchup for the Kansas City Chiefs. Cincinnati is very, very good against the pass this season, but Juju Smith-Schuster is back to full health and is going to be a start for me because I expect Cincinnati to be throwing the football. And if Cincinnati throws the football, KC will throw the football. And if KC will throw the football, see how that works. We're just going to be throwing balls all over the place. For the Cincinnati Bengals, though, Jamar Chase is expected back this week, but as of right now, it is not guaranteed. If he plays this week, we play him going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. Yes, there might be a little bit of a risk associated with it, but we've been holding him for all this time. Fantasy playoffs are right around the corner. We got to find out what we've got with Jamar Chase. Him and T. Higgins will be solid starts for me once again. The Los Angeles Chargers, the Las Vegas Raiders, going to be bringing some question marks for the Chargers for us, all right? Because we still don't know about Mike Williams yet this week. Josh Palmer didn't have a great week last week, but DeAndre Carter did. Those are some of the questions that I have, right? For me right now, Keenan Allen, since his return, since he's been healthy, he's been all right. Josh Palmer, obviously a down week last week, but if there's no Mike Williams, Palmer to me is still the big play guy in this offense, one of which Las Vegas tends to give up every once in a while. Devontae Adams for the Vegas Raiders will end up being a start for me. Matt Collins coming off a decent performance last week, and he's had some great moments this season, don't get me wrong, but he's not been consistent. He only has one game with 100 yards, and he only has in only 6 games with 60-plus yards. So he hasn't really been consistent enough that we're like, hey, we got to be throwing him out there every single week. So for me personally, not running him out there in this matchup. Indianapolis and Dallas, and I'm really glad that I didn't give up on Michael Pittman Jr., and I'm really hoping all of you out there didn't give up on him either. I tried to speak it into existence. He found the end zone last week. He's the wide receiver 18 over the last 3 weeks. So no, he hasn't been wide receiver 1 status, but if you've been playing him as your wide receiver 2, you've been just fine. He's got a wide receiver 2 floor every single week with a little bit of low-end wide receiver 1 upside, and now we're going to be going going up against Dallas. It might be a little bit of a tougher matchup. Diggs obviously is going to be taking a look at him. We know that Diggs every once in a while can get beat around. For me, Michael Pittman still going to be a really safe wide receiver 2 option. Paris Campbell for me, just not enough for me to go back to him this week. There is an opportunity for him. He's kind of a high-risk start for me, though. So for those of you out there in PPR leagues, that's really the only spot that I'm saying, yeah, Paris Campbell is a guy I'm starting as a wide receiver 3 in PPR leagues. If you're in a half PPR leagues, he becomes even more vulnerable at that point to a decent performance for you. And then we're not even thinking about it in standard. So it depends on your league settings whether or not we're starting Paris Campbell this week. And CeeDee Lamb, Indianapolis does allow the fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. Still going to roll with Lamb this week. Like I said last week, in that matchup, I thought Dallas was going to run away with it against the New York Giants, and until late, they did not. Dak threw a couple of bad interceptions. They ended up staying in the game. More passing opportunity for CeeDee Lamb. Ended up finishing the week as wide receiver 16, I believe. I had him as wide receiver 18. This week, I am going to be bumping him up a little bit. Probably going to put him right at that low-end wide receiver 1 status. So, again, this is going to be a tough matchup. I don't think Dallas is going to run away with it. I think Indianapolis is going to try and control the game with Jonathan Taylor, control clock, keep him off the field. So, again, just a little bit lower on his ceiling this week. But it doesn't matter because just like last week, you're starting him anyway. And Monday Night Football, New Orleans and Tampa Bay. And Olave has had a very quiet wide receiver 14 season for me this season. I mean, when you just look at it, I don't feel like we've heard enough about him or heard as much as we probably should have. He's had some big performances, but the kicker is he's only had 2 games this season where he's had less than 10 fantasy points. That's what I love right there. Give me that against Tampa Bay this week. Chris Godwin will definitely be a start. Touchdowns in back-to-back games. He's finally producing, which is what we've wanted to see. Love it. Chris Godwin is a much safer start on this team right now than, unfortunately, Mike Evans. But keep in mind, too, with Mike Evans, that last week, he had 2 big plays that were just barely missed that would have made it a huge week for him. So, unfortunately, it didn't happen. He is still wide receiver 21. I understand why you might not want to start him, but again, if he's your wide receiver 2, who cares? Toss him in your lineup. But ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for me. I am heading out for the day. Keep an eye for those rankings videos to come out on Thursday. Appreciate everybody and everything the community is doing to help support the channel. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll catch y'all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.